your source for everything paranormal. Para-X. The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para-X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
Merry meet and blessed be, heed the words I call to thee. Honor the old ones in name and deed, hearken not to others' greed. Pray to the moon when she is round, luck with you shall then abound. Respect the earth, the sky, the sea, as you will it, so mote it be. Welcome to Stirring the Cauldron on the Para-X Radio Network. And now, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
Merry meet and welcome to the show. The Mysterioso March by Kevin MacLeod was what you heard just leading into the show. And that kind of fits my guest tonight, Hollywood historian and owner of dearly departed tourist Scott Michaels. Not in the sense that he's a man of mystery, because most of the time he tells it like it is. But some of the topics he talks about on his podcast are not only mysterious, some are scary, others grisly, but most of all, really interesting. And for those of you who might not be aware of the Dearly Departed podcast, that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. So, Scott, thank you for coming in and allowing me to twist your arm a couple of weeks ago and coming back on the show. And I want to hear about, the podcast is really good, so I think we need to spread the news, right?
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me back on. I always love to come on to your show, and I appreciate being asked. And I appreciate you spreading the word, because we Mike, Dorsey, and I are really enjoying doing the podcast. And, podcasts are great. Don't you just, wonder, are people going to ever figure it out that, here's the way I look at it. Are people going to figure out this is all just BS, really?
Well, it depends what we're talking about. There are plenty of BS podcasts out there. There are some that actually are meaningful, but the beauty of it is, who would think that you could sit down and record a show in your underwear or doing whatever, and then playing it for people to hear whenever they want?
That's what I guess. Yeah, that's what I mean. I don't want to be. Yeah. I don't want to sound like I'm suckering people into listening. But when we're doing it, we like talking about it so much. We really enjoy it. It just feels like we're sitting there for an hour just talking, and then I feel like somebody actually listens to this. That's what I mean. I don't mean to be disrespectful to the people that like it.
No, it's true. I keep getting people that like my page, the Stirring the Cauldron page, and I'm thinking, where did they come from? How did they hear about it? I don't get it, but I'm happy about it. But it's just kind of strange.
Yeah, I love your. It's something. I'll just be, late at night. I'll just be poking around, and I'll find one I just listened to the other day with the gentleman from Britain, the doctor who just got a doctorate, and Cal.
Cal Cooper. Yeah.
Yeah. That was fascinating.
That was amazing. Yeah, parapsychologist. He, and it's funny because when I did a show with him before that, he was in Egypt doing all this, and he did the show on Skype from Egypt. And
he said he came literally face to face with King Tut.
Yes, he did. He said
the actual corpse.
He was inches away from it, apparently, and described him as a short little guy, about 4'7" or something. And he was alone in the tomb chamber with him, all by himself.
That's outrageous.
I know. Can you imagine? I mean, yeah.
No.
I think, honestly, I mean, all my shows are good. My guests, rather, not my shows. Sometimes I'm really messed up, but that particular show with Cal, it's in the top 10. I mean, it was really, really, he's really good, and it was great talk.
It was riveting. It really was, and I was thrilled. So it is interesting how you could just be, messing around and looking at YouTube videos of 60s music or someone else, and bam, you stumble on something like that, and you're engrossed for an hour. Mm-hmm. And I like to think that when people listen to ours, they that might happen, but then I just feel like we're just sitting around and talking. I hope that's but that's why I worry that people are going to find out that we're just
that you're having a good time. Yeah, well, I mean, but you know what? Those are the podcasts that I like to listen to when the people talking on them seem to be able to relate to each other and actually like each other and talk as they're having a conversation that other people can just be listening into, as opposed to scripting everything and not being really personable or whatever. Makes a difference in whether it's
conversations make a difference too. Because I've listened to podcasts that are just narrations, and that seems to be that's hard. I mean, there's a place for that. I'm not the ear for that sort of thing.
Right.
So I think that makes a difference.
There are people that also just read stuff. They can't talk without something in front of them, whether it be a script, a page of a book, or something. There's no ad-libbing. There's no, they're not comfortable doing it, which I guess is the problem. Therefore, probably shouldn't be. But, in this day and age, everybody can get a podcast if they want,
And they do.
And they do. So, but they all have audiences. So, it's good. I mean, it's a good freedom of speech thing, unless you, say something really horrible and then, get fired for it or whatever. That's happened.
Oh, my God, those poor people. Yeah, you really have to be careful. But that's one thing Mike and I do. I mean, Mike, we met when I first started doing Dearly Departed back in, 15 years now. And my first 6 or 8 months existed solely on that Half Price Gold Star Events website. And Gold Star was really new. There was no Groupon or anything like that back then. Right. So, and we were one of the first, 50 people to ever sign up to Gold Star. We had, I met the president, and we had lunch and all that kind of stuff. It was really wild. But anyway, we went to, because Mike, my co-host, lived in Albert Decker's apartment building. And he didn't know that was what it was. And just for giggles, he took his mom on my tour, found the cheap tickets, and to find out why his building was on the tour. And we ended up hitting it off. And that's when he came up to me and said, "Well, what do you think about doing a documentary?" And that's when we filmed Dearly Departed Volume 1. I had all those nice invitations from people that said, "Hey, come on up and see my place, Jack Cassidy's apartment," the people that lived in Jean Harlow's last home. And I just sort of collected those invitations, and Mike came along with a camera, and we sort of did our kind of, what is the term for that, gonzo? I think it is, it's rogue, first documentary. And, Mike and I have known each other for a really long time, and it's nice to have a sort of kindred person who, I just enjoy talking to him, and he has an interest in this too, so it's fun. So I got lucky, very lucky.
Yeah, you two have this chemistry about being able to talk and be comfortable with each other and run with it, and I think that's what makes things good. Plus, you also have the benefit of doing the podcasts from one of my favorite restaurants that I haven't been into in 100 years, unfortunately, but you do them from El Coyote. And El Coyote has a certain significance to you.
I mean, just a little bit. Yeah, just a little bit. Well, because the El Coyote is where Sharon Tate and her Sharon Tate and Jay Sebring and Abigail Folger and Wojciech Frykowski, 4 of the 5 victims of the Tate murders had their last supper the night they were murdered. They left the El Coyote, and they were dead in 3 hours. So that's when I first moved to Los Angeles. That was one of my first destinations. You know, I love the El Coyote. I used to really trash the food. I used to really dog on it, and since then I've gone to many other Mexican restaurants that are far less yummy foods and have a better reputation. So I will always tout the El Coyote. It's great food. The atmosphere is better than anything, and it's got a bit of history, and it's good celebrity spotting too.
Yeah, it is. I actually really like I don't know if they still have it, but the Mexican pizza. I loved that growing up. I mean, that was like, Is it?
Yeah, that's right. You grew up with all this stuff. I keep forgetting this is your old hood.
Yeah, yeah, and that I would always run over to El Coyote for a Mexican pizza. But next time you're out in this hood, got to take you to a really good Mexican restaurant not far from here.
Okay,
So,
promise.
Yes, I promise. I promise.
Good.
But yeah, so El Coyote, I mean, to sit there and do a show from there, it's good stuff. It really is.
Yeah, and I told you, I think I talked to you about it before. I wasn't sure if I talked about it on the air, but I know that now that it's closer to the time where it's being released, I can talk about being involved with the Tarantino movie. And it was a real treat to get to spend time with Tarantino on this Once Upon a Time in Hollywood movie. Tarantino could have spent a fortune getting his own researchers to go out and do, what he wanted, but he saw our documentary, and I was summoned to his office. You know, somebody said Tarantino wants to meet you, and I'm like, okay, sure. So I went there, and he had Mike and I, our movie, sitting on his desk, and we talked for a really long time, and then we went driving around for a long time, and ultimately it was really cool to be involved. So I was there for the night that they shot at the El Coyote, and it was a really special night. It was something else.
Oh, I'm sure. It's got to be. And just to meet Tarantino, and obviously, I mean, people know you by reputation that you are, a really good historian. Where the bodies are buried, where they grew up, all this stuff. And so what a thrill. Absolutely, of all people.
Yeah, to be, and again, it's one of those things where I think they're going to find out I'm phony. You know what I mean? It's going to drop, and they're going to figure it out. But being there for the shoot and watching that yellow car drive in the parking lot, and those four actors come out wearing the clothes that they were ultimately murdered in that night, portraying those four people. I mean, I got goosebumps. I still get goosebumps every time I think about it. It was like watching the history that I've been obsessed with unfolding in front of my eyes. It was time travel for a very short period of time, and it was a real, tragic, terrible, but fascinating and wonderful time at the same time.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm anxious to see the movie, and I mean, you're saying that they came out in the same clothes and everything. I mean, what an attention to detail this movie is going to make.
He is such a nerd. He really is. And he pulled me over during that site, and he pointed out something that was happening in the neighborhood at the same time the murders were happening. He goes, "Hey, Scott, check this out." And he started to explain, "Oh, you're kidding. I thought I knew everything about this." And he's just sitting there with a big smile on his face, like he was trying to impress me. And that sounds so silly, and it sounds like I'm bragging, and it's not at all that way. It was two nerds for a couple of minutes just sharing nerdy information, and it was really, really cool. And watching, again, it's one of those things, if you're obsessed with one thing and you're studying this one thing for 20 years, and all of a sudden you close your eyes and open it and it's happening in front of your face, that's the craziest feeling. It really is.
Yeah, well, for me, just watching, I mean, I didn't get down there during the filming, but, Brian was walking around doing the walkabouts up and down Hollywood Boulevard and stuff and putting them on Facebook. And to see what, back in the 60s, I mean, I remember Hollywood Boulevard in the late 50s even, where, honest to God, people walked around, women wore gloves and dresses and hats, and men wore suits and ties and hats. I mean, this was the traffic up and down Hollywood Boulevard then.
God.
Yeah, way, way different. I mean, it was, there were nothing. I mean, it was even before the Walk of Fame. Oh God, am I old? But to see,
what a treat! What a treat to have been around for that, Marla. I mean, I only moved here in the '80s, late '80s, or started coming here then, and it was already pretty rough and tumble at that point. But there were still nuggets of it here and there before it went to total pot like it is now. I mean, it's going to get better. It has to, but with all the building that's going on right now and all the renovations and all the history, but to have actually seen it in its original state before it went down the drain, boy, that would have been something.
Well, because most of those, the buildings are still there for the most part, the ones that were built in the 1920s and stuff, they're still around, but places like Broadway Hollywood, which anybody that ever watched I Love Lucy recognizes that building from, Lucy Goes to Hollywood kind of thing. Now it's a very, very expensive bunch of condos. It's huge, but whatever. But it was just, when I was watching Brian thing walking, I went, oh my God, I remember that. Oh my God, look at that theater. Oh, I used to shop there. I mean, that was this thing where everything was exactly the same, and it was kind of like...
They put Peaches Records back, for God's sake,
Yeah.
That was insane. Yeah, it was a wonderful, magical couple of months while Tarantino was working on that movie and putting, going to J. Sebring's salon, and it was there again. That was something. And the location, I mean, it was crazy. Anyway.
Yeah, no, so, that was very, very cool. Now, the podcast takes people on an irreverent journey down the dark side of Hollywood history. And in your first podcast, came out right before Christmas last year, and you spoke about Penny Marshall's passing. You spoke about Dean Martin, Tiny Tim, and in keeping with the season, the death of Santa Claus. Now, how does the death of Santa Claus... Now, I remember going to the Santa Claus Lane parades, and back then nobody would shoot Santa off the boulevard or anything. So which Santa Claus are you talking about?
Well, certain stories have always kind of jumped off pages of books, or it was before the internet that someone said, "Did you ever hear this story about such and such?" And this is back when you had to go to the library to get old newspapers, and when you had to send away to get death certificates and things like that. And I heard about this guy called Santa Claus who was who died in Chicago, and it was a man who legally changed his name to Santa Claus. And I thought, well, that'd be a fun Christmas card picture to get a picture of Santa Claus's grave. And then, but then I started doing more research, and I found out this guy. His name was Leroy Schultz. He was a postal worker, and he retired, and he grew his beard, and he became a professional Santa Claus, and he moved to the North Pole, New York, and he was Santa Claus year round. And it was just, he seemed like such a nice guy, and he did so much work for charity. And he was filming in Chicago. They brought him to Chicago to do like a Santa Claus Christmas special thing for, I don't know, kids television. And on December 23rd of 1984, I think it is, 2 days before Christmas, he died in his hotel room. And I thought, wow, that's an ironic, interesting story. So I sort of gravitated towards that one, and I never got to his grave. Actually, this was before I had any kind of semblance of good nature or taste or anything. His sister's name was on the death certificate, so I phoned the sister up and I asked where he was buried. But she wasn't. She was kind enough, but firm enough with me to never call her again. But but I did make an effort. So and I wasn't being like trashy about it. But anyway, I can't say I blame her now. I wouldn't do that.
People get touchy about things sometimes, but there is, and this floated around Facebook a long time. There was this picture of this little kid in a cemetery, and it's probably photoshopped, but there's a very nice big headstone that says Santa Claus, and it had dates on it. Maybe it's this guy's. I don't know. But there's this little boy standing in front of it looking at the camera and hysterical, crying. I mean, his face looked like, oh my God, somebody's killed Santa Claus kind of thing. So that was pretty amusing. But it might have been this guy. If I find that picture, I'll let you know and track it down maybe. Because you never can have enough Santa Claus pictures, even, past past ones. What can I say? But you know what? And I started to laugh because you listen to the podcast and things come up and it brings back thoughts. And the minute I saw the name Tiny Tim, that brought back a memory because, all right, I liked him for a while. I had a cousin who lived in Philadelphia, and he came to visit one time, and he brought me, and this was like, 68, 67, he brought me Tiny Tim's album, God Bless Tiny Tim.
I love that record, yeah.
Yeah. And so I thought, I listened to it, and I really liked it. And so in art class in my junior year at high school, I almost got tossed out because of this album, because once a week the teacher allowed the students to bring in record albums, vinyl, to play on his turntable during class, each day of the week. And so people were bringing in the Stones and Crosby, Stills and Nash, the Who, the Beatles. But when it was my turn, I decided to bring in Tiny Tim. And I got to the classroom really early because the classroom was up over the auditorium because the art teacher was working on all the plays. Hollywood High was famous for its plays and the stuff he put on. And so Mr. Frost was, had his office above the auditorium. So I get there early, nobody's there, and I tiptoe in and I put the thing on the record on the turntable, and I heard the bell ring. So I figured everybody was going to be coming in really quick. So I crank up the volume, and there Tiny Tim is singing Tip Through the Tulips, and down the stairs from his office comes Mr. Frost with a look on his face that could kill. I mean, he didn't really care for me much because I was a little bit mouthy back then. And one time behind his back, I started mumbling Frosty the Snowman, and he didn't like that. But, so he came in, and he was not amused. And the look that he gave me, I'm lucky I graduated, honestly, or at least made through that semester, because he was not appreciative of Tiny Tim at all, made me take it off, and just, scowled at me the rest of the day.
Tiny Tim, that song, it was used a couple of seasons ago in American Horror Story. Mm-hmm. It's really, it was one of the Saw movies or something like that. Yeah. But it was really a sinister sounding song. If you remove, the 30 or 40 or 50 years it's been since that song came out, if you hear it nowadays, it's like, whoa, that's really creepy. And Tiny Tim was creepy too. I mean, that was his gig. But if you want a good laugh, I own the box set of Laugh In, mm-hmm. and it's like all 3 seasons and every episode, and it's hard work to get through because they were fun to dip into. But the episode where Dan Rowan surprises Dick Martin with Tiny Tim for the first time. Because Tiny Tim was big in the coffee houses in Greenwich Village, and Laugh-In was quite cutting edge with the comics and the acts that they brought in. But the first time Dan Rowan brings in Tiny Tim and puts him next to Dick Martin and leaves, it's gold. It is golden. But and luckily when Mike and I do these, a lot of times I'll have or he will have personal anecdotes about the people. I met Tiny back in Chicago once, and I was in touch with his widow, who told me a lot of information, a lot of interesting stories about Tiny as well. So it's kind of fun to be able to share those stories, which usually would have been just lost, an anecdote that at least a couple of more people can listen to.
Well, one of the songs, we're getting on Tiny Tim a little too much, but one of the songs that I really liked off that album was written by Irving Berlin in the 1920s. Stay Down Here Where You Belong. And it's the devil talking to his son who wanted to go up above. And the devil's telling his son that everybody up there are literally crazy because they kill each other and they fight and they do all this stuff. I mean, that's really a meaningful song. And even though Tiny Tim did it in his Tiny Tim voice, he didn't squeal or anything. I mean, he did it in his baritone voice. But he picked interesting songs for that album, and I've always liked that song. If you listen to the lyrics, it makes
and
a whole lot.
He wasn't doing it ironically. I mean, he was dead serious.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, okay, enough Tiny Tim. Um, but yeah,
God
I mean,
bless
so,
him.
God bless Tiny Tim, yes. But, it got me into trouble. He got me into trouble, but, what are you going to say? I could get myself into trouble at the same time. Now, you know this, you cover lots of interesting topics on the podcast, like the murder of B-movie actress Susan Cabot, best known as the Wasp Woman. And I did not know this, that her own son beat her to death. That came as a shock.
Yeah.
Don't know why.
Yeah.
But it did.
I mean, that's sometimes. I mean, Susan Cabot. Okay, I had to do a little bit more research on her as an actress, to find out. I watched Wasp Woman, and I could not actually name another, but it's her method of dying that really put her on the map, as far as I'm concerned. And wow, what an exit!
Yeah, I mean, if nobody ever watched that movie before, they will do it now. Now that they that they heard that her son beat her to death. I didn't read the whole story, but why did he do that?
Well, I mean, to just a tiny bit of background, Wasp Woman was a fascinating movie because it really was ahead of its time. It was a woman who was the head of a cosmetics agency, and she was sort of the head of the board of directors, and they were trying to oust her. And she had this secret formula, or she had a doctor that was making an anti-aging formula, and it was really interesting because they were dismissing her because she was aging and she couldn't be the head of the company and the face of the company, and they were trying to get rid of her. And she knew this doctor that was making a potion, I guess you could say, out of wasp secretions, we'll say, and it made wrinkles go away. And I don't know what happened, but anyway, she went crazy and just jacked up her face with all kinds of this wasp stuff, and ended up turning into a wasp. It's a fascinating movie. But then she was an odd person in real life, and she had a son named Timothy who was he was a dwarf. He had dwarfism, and dwarfs tend to have maladies as far as their physical maladies, because their organs don't generally catch up with the rest of their body, or vice versa. And midgets are perfectly proportioned people, but dwarfs, aren't. And that's the difference. So he was in a lot of pain, and he was in experimental growth hormones. And one day he snapped, and he beat his mother. Beat his mother. Say that again. Beat his mother to death with a dumbbell, with a weightlifting dumbbell. Oh. And he hid it in a box of detergent, and called the police and said that ninjas broke into his house and killed his mother. And they also said that he was potentially the illegitimate son of his mother's affair with the King of Jordan, and he was paying for his upkeep. It's a great story.
It is. Well, all of the stories that you come up upon are great stories, and it's because as a historian you dig deeper than what you read in the Inquirer or see on the surface, or deal with hearsay. You bring out the important things, the interesting things, the things that other people overlook. And those are the kinds of the things that make the best stories, don't you think?
Well, yeah, I've always, the weirdo facts, the weird things you didn't know about the things you thought you knew everything about. Mm-hmm. That's been my go-to place. So, yeah, it was Susan Cabot's career is interesting. She was a beautiful woman, but, yeah, what really attracted me was that weird story. And so, yeah, that's it, grabbing the nuggets of weird information and focusing on those and bringing them to other people's attention. That's what I do. And that's what I enjoy doing the most, it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun. I mean, it's more interesting to dig. I mean, I love research myself. People think you're crazy, but, in the Ghosts of Hollywood books, we talked about things, and I found things that most people weren't aware of for certain locations and things, because you dig and you get more information, and it makes it so much more interesting. Speaking of interesting, if anybody needs a break, we're going to go away for 2 minutes, and we'll be right back to talk about, the death of Walt Disney and Disneyland, the Addams Family, and a whole bunch of other things, including some stuff that Scott's got coming up that's going to be really interesting. So we'll be right back.
Don't go away. There's more Stirring the Cauldron with Marla Brooks right after these important messages.
Are you haunted by shadow people in the middle of the night?
Do you secretly love all things creepy and spooky, enjoying ghost stories and horror fiction from the best storytellers?
Do you have a true ghost experience you want to share, but no one will believe you?
If yes, listen to the professionals on What Are You Afraid of? Horror Paranormal Show, Friday nights at 9 p.m. on Para X Radio and at www.whatareyouafraidofpodcast.com.
What Are You Afraid of on Para X?
Our creepy and demented hosts are on call to provide you with all your spooky needs with true ghost stories, interviews, indie music, and new horror fiction. We are ready to scare you.
Para X.
From Haunted Road Media comes an exciting new novel by author Marla Brooks, Soul Connection, A Deadly Obsession. Two lost souls, ripped apart by murder in another century, find each other again in the present, only to discover that the murderer has followed them through time. Can their love save them, or will history repeat itself? Find out in this captivating new novel by Marla Brooks, Soul Connection, A Deadly Obsession. Available now on Amazon.com and at BarnesandNoble.com.
Demons, vampires, werewolves, skinwalkers, all of this and more, Sunday nights at midnight on the Staring Into the Abyss radio show. Come, get lost with us.
Welcome back to Stirring the Cauldron. Once again, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
Welcome back, and I'm here with Scott Michaels, and we're talking about his dearly departed podcast. And as usual, we're veering into other things as we go along because they just come up and they're really important and interesting to talk about rather. But the death of Walt Disney, I mean, I think I know, but are you referring to the fact that they think his head is like cryoed somewhere or what?
Well, we certainly did. We did touch on that. One of the things that, that's usually the go-to story, isn't it? That people go
right.
to.
Yeah.
The one thing I found rather interesting is that his daughter, and I forget which daughter, he had two, that does a lecture. She every once in a while will address a corporation or something to that effect, a group of people. Mm-hmm. And she talks for a while about her father and the invention of the parks, etc. And at the end, there's a question and answer period. And before it opened up, she said, first of all, in answer to the first question, no, it's not true.
Good for her.
And, the fact that he left his housekeeper, she ended up having like 900,000 shares of Disney stock. He just gave them to her for Christmas and for her birthday and said, don't use them. And then her kids found him in a shoebox, and or that his parents died or his mother died in a. Weird facts again about these people and Disney himself, of course. Yeah.
Well, yeah,
and the Kurt Russell thing. I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you. I apologize.
No, go.
The Kurt Russell thing is outrageous, though, isn't it? One of the last things Walt Disney did was write down the name Kurt Russell on a notepad. Okay.
I mean, but also Disneyland and Disney, even the cartoons. I mean, there is a dark side to Disney, and we've talked about this before. When Sam, my friend Sam, who worked at Disney, we talked about when you're on Mr. Toad's Wild Ride and you're leaving, you go through hell, literally. On the way out of the ride and stuff. So there's lots of little darkness. Where there's dark, there's light. So I guess you can't be all happy all over the place. But
that's true. But I think that certainly, I know that his mother's death affected him quite dramatically, and I think that that's reflected in some of the characters in his, sympathetic characters in his works, and I do believe that his real life certainly had impacted his career. And so interesting that when he died, you know, he was languishing at St. John's Hospital. St. Joseph's, I'm sorry, in Burbank.
Yeah.
And across the street from the Disney studios, and they moved his bed to the window and left the lights of the studio on so he could watch out the window his creation as he was dying in his hospital bed. What a poetic story that is.
I know. It is really touching and nice of them to do that. But yeah, it's I don't know. There's so many rumors that go around about people all over the place that some are true, some aren't. But like, okay, let's talk about, and I don't know, you talk about in one of the podcasts, the Addams Family and the deaths of the cast members. The only one, because I didn't really study this, the only one I think that was probably untimely was Ted Cassidy, because, you know, being a giant like that, he died at a relatively early age. But what, are there anything that Carolyn Jones too. Okay. I mean, she was fairly young too. But let's talk about what you were talking about with the deaths of the cast members.
Well, Ted Cassidy, you're right. I think he was the first of the cast members to die, and he was fairly young. I think he was still in his late 40s, actually, when he died. I think. Yeah. And he was. God, what was he? 6'11" or 7'2" or something like that.
Yeah, something like
enormous.
Yeah, he was.
But the thing that stands out was that he was, according to most published sources, and actually in a physical account from a family member, he was in an urn and buried in his backyard. And and the house is sold now. Maybe it's even gone now. Nobody knows what happened to the urn. There's a couple of rumors, but I don't think the family has it. And I think that Lurch is I don't know, probably sitting on someone's shelf or in some thrift store somewhere.
Is that the San Fernando Valley one? Because there's another story, or maybe it's the same story about somebody being buried in their backyard too. Somebody really famous. But I thought it was in San Fernando Valley somewhere.
There is. This guy, I think Lurch was Palisades. I think Pacific Palisades, and I'm trying to think of who you might be thinking of, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure who that is.
I'll let you know.
But there was a story of Abner Kravitz from Bewitched being stolen. Remember his George Tobias, who played Abner Kravitz, and he was actually in the hearse in a casket when the hearse was hijacked and that's stolen. And eventually they saw that they had a body, I guess, and they ditched it somewhere. But
oh my God,
a great story.
Good thing they didn't hear her screaming Abner, right? Yeah. Yeah, and then you're also talking about, I'm just throwing things that people really remember, Gilligan's Island and the real-life fates of the main castaways, because they weren't all exactly what you saw on that 3-hour tour.
And it was cool, too, because I had some experiences with the actors, and it's really cool to be able to tell those stories again. They're not major stories, but good enough stories that it paints them in an interesting, more human light than the 2 or 3 years that they were on television, and it's over 50 years ago. But it's so fun, and Mike and I, our next project we're going to be recording next week is going to be about the Beverly Hillbillies.
Oh, nice.
And so I'll be able to tell my story about having dinner with Max Baer one night. And a very boozy dinner with Max Baer Jr. And we talked about Sharon Tate, and we talked about all sorts of things. It was and I got to hang out with Donna Douglas and Buddy Ebsen once. I mean, it was like so cool.
I interviewed him once for a magazine, Buddy Ebsen, and he did his Well Doggies thing
nice.
right in the middle of the interview. He just did it. You know, there was a pause.
Did you record it?
Yeah, I did actually. Well, I was
good.
taping it, but no, I don't have it because I lost everything. But that's not the point. I mean, it was just it's like, okay, Robert Goulet, when I was interviewing him, broke into song something from Camelot or Man of La Mancha. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting how these people kind of do that, and I loved it. I mean, I really did. And with Bob Denver, real quick story, I had to interview him, and he was doing a book signing down on Sunset Boulevard at that bookstore. I can't remember the name, across from Tower Records. Book Soup. Thank you. And so I was in there, and I'm watching, and he's doing all these signings and stuff. And about an hour, I'm standing there, and he kind of goes, psst, calls me over to the table, and he says, "Do you smoke?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Come on, we're going out back. Let's have a cigarette." So yeah, Gilligan and I went back and had a cigarette in the middle of his book signing, and then really neat, Dwayne Hickman walked in. Wow. They didn't expect him. So now you got Dobie Gillis and Maynard G. Krebs together, and nobody expected him, and everybody's going, "Ah, look," So it was kind of fun.
That's great. That's only in Hollywood that it could never happen. As much as I rag on this place, and I do, it's so frustrating. But things like that would never happen anywhere else, and that's the magic. I just wish those things happened more often.
I know. Yeah, I do too. So, in addition to all these things, and people can hear all these stories at Podbean, we'll give that address, URL in a minute. But you also stay very newsworthy in each segment, in each episode. You talk about things in the news of interest, as well as you've got photos, you've got videos of things, you've got links. I mean, for each episode, there's like a ton of information. I mean, an amazing amount. And I mean, and stuff you really don't expect, because I'm looking down the list and all of a sudden I see this link to the channel for Ask a Mortician. Now, what the heck is that all about?
Oh, give me a minute. I'll tell you all what it's all about. No, that was not a positive addition to the web to the presentation, but it was still a satisfying one.
Ask a Mortician. Okay. But
yeah, I got nothing more to say about that.
No, I'll have to go do that link, and I mean, if it still works, and find out what it's all about, and then probably.
Well, listen to that podcast. Listen to the first 5 minutes or so of that podcast, and you'll get the idea. But
okay, all right.
But and then well, we did last one we did was on Phil Spector and Bonnie Lee Bakley, and that was a real interesting thing to delve into too, because of the history of Lana Clarkson, and that's not to judge them at all, but things, when people are in the public eye, be it the way they murdered or they were murdered, or actual murderers, they're sort of fair game in the research, and the facts are the facts. So it's fascinating to delve into their lives and find out a little more about them as human beings, rather than just the woman who ended up dead at Phil Spector's house.
And it was very interesting to see the crime scene photo of her dead at Phil Spector's house.
Which one did you see? Did you see the facial one or the foot one?
No. I saw the other one. Thank goodness. I'm not good at looking at dead people's faces. But this was, I guess it was like somebody upstairs looking down. It was a Getty image, which kind of surprised me. But you could see the coroner there and everybody with their notepads and everything. So, I mean, there's tons of stuff that you add to each podcast that are really kind of amazing. And wonderful.
Mike's great. And the good thing about doing this, too, or the fun thing about doing it, is that as a documentary, we couldn't do this, because a lot of these things, like music, or like when we did the thing about the Ramones, they're not things that you could really have rights to put on a documentary, but you could assemble them together in a sort of blog format, and it's all fair game because it's all internet. And if someone says, well, this copyright is being exploited or whatever, they say, okay, we'll take it down, because it's just the internet. It's just the way things are. So we're able to assemble all the information that we want to illustrate the stories, whereas if we wanted to do it in a documentary form, it would cost us a fortune.
So how often do you do a new podcast?
It's not as often as we should, but it actually works for us in a way because people look forward to it, which is kind of cool too. It's not a drudgery. We don't say, oh, it's Thursday, we have to have one. It's whenever we get sort of inspired. And Mike, he texted me. He was in Oklahoma yesterday, or he is today, and he was texting me photographs from that museum of having to do with the Oklahoma bombing, and the photographs that he was sending me were insane. And so last night we were talking about a subject. We decided on the Beverly Hillbillies, texting. And then today he was sending me these photos, and I'm like, oh, man, we got to talk about this. This is crazy, the stuff that they have on display there. I was sort of surprised, and it's fascinating, and they're just covering all bases. So I was sort of surprised to see that they have Timothy McVeigh's, hotel room door that they knocked down when they arrested him. So things like that are so interesting. It's not just photographs and rubble, but it's the entire story, and I can't wait to hear more about it from Mike. So that's the fun of doing it, because we just talk about things that we do in our lives. The other day I met John Waters, and we hung out with him for a little while. And that was a real treat. Again, only in L.A. So so these are conversational points that are just like we're talking about, but sort of, I don't know.
You can just go on and on with them. But it's just so interesting. It really is, because it'll appeal. Every episode will appeal to 3 or 4 different kinds of people, because there's 3 or 4 different kinds of stuff in there, and different stories and whatever. So you have these podcasts on what, Podbean? Where do you have a link?
It's it's on Google Play. It's on something called Stitch. It's on iTunes, but a Dearly Departed Pod is the website that you can go to. But it's on all of those different formats too, and it's fun just because we can put them out as we feel like doing it, and that makes it really a fun project.
Yeah, well, you know what? Doing something like this has to be fun. Otherwise, you shouldn't be doing it to begin with. But as you said, I mean, there is a benefit to living in LA. There's a benefit to people that you meet. There's a benefit to being out in the public eye, as you are, with the tours and everything. You never know who you're going to walk into or who's going to join one of your tours. So, yeah, I mean, it's amazing. And you've also been on TV on, like, Anthony Bourdain, the late Anthony Bourdain show. And
who wanted to know about autoerotic asphyxiation? How weird is that?
Huh?
You know? Oh. Anthony Bourdain, I did a segment with for his show,
that's right.
The Layover.
Yeah, that's right.
I was taking him around, and he was really into it. He loved all the celebrity gossip and murders and scandals. And he asked me point blank, "Do you have anything on this tour with autoerotic asphyxiation?"
Interesting.
And it is interesting because he had hanged himself in France, and it just he had a bit of an edge to him. It just left a conversation open to have by him bringing that up. It was just very interesting.
Very interesting. You've got stuff going on in the next few weeks and months over at Dearly Departed Tours and Museum. A lot of stuff. Let's talk about it, because we have like 10 minutes left, so let's get to it.
Okay. Well, we had very recently launched the Black Dahlia tour, which is kind of cool, because Jonesy is the guide, my manager guide, who assembled this tour. And it's fascinating, man. It's so cool to take one of my tours and learn something from my own tours, and which is really, really cool, because it makes me realize that we should never be just comfortable and complacent, but there's always more information. And it's a real, female-oriented tour, because Jonesy talks a lot about what it was like to be a woman at that time in the late 40s in Los Angeles, and what it was like and how women were treated and seen back then. And Elizabeth Short, she was a bit of a spitfire. She wasn't the, total victim, as of course she was, but as a human being, she had a bit of an edge to her too, and she wasn't just known as a victim, but she actually had a real personality, and she was a spitfire. And the theme of it is sort of somebody knows who did this. And instead of just going straight to the detective's father theory, there are several more theories that Jonesy touches upon, and we go down to the Biltmore Hotel and go down to where her body was discovered. So it's a really fascinating, and that has a lot to do with sort of girl power in Hollywood. It's led by a female guide. We have a large female presence at the shop now, which it was predominantly male for years. And nothing, there was nothing contrived about it, but it's really kind of cool to have that balance now and to have that different perspective on things.
Yeah.
This weekend we're kicking off the Jean Harlow tour, which is we only run that a couple of times a year. We just did a Marilyn Monroe tour last weekend, and we're doing another one in August on the anniversary of her death. So there's lots of things going on tour-wise, and we're going to have an animal tour coming up too, which will be pretty interesting. Yeah, just having to do with the animals and where they, Hollywood animals.
Like the pet cemetery
horses.
where Ralph Valentino's dog is buried?
We won't be going out there, but certainly that'll be addressed. But there's like a pet Hall of Fame or Walk of Fame in Burbank, and there's the horse that's buried underneath the parking lot, and there's under the 101 is Toto, and just sort of Lassie and all the sort of different animals in Hollywood, and it's going to be a completely G-rated tour.
Wow, that's great.
And just about all the groovy animals that have left this plane. But in August is our big, it's the 50th anniversary of the Tate LaBianca murders, and or better known as the Manson murders, and we've got a lot of things scheduled for that weekend. We have the 50th anniversary at the El Coyote, and we have a tour of the Spahn Ranch done by someone who knows the way around there very well. Yeah, and we'll stop at Denny's and have breakfast. That's that's where the Manson bought a milkshake the night of the LaBianca murders for everyone that was in the car. So it's not a celebration of where they died or how they died, but it's certainly an acknowledgement of the anniversary. So on the actual day of the Tate murders, because we'll do the other things on the 8th, leading up to the murders, which happened that night. On the 9th, we're going to be doing just a 60s theme, and we're doing a daytime theme of sort of 60s landmarks, music landmarks around Los Angeles, and where the Tarantino movie was filmed. And then that evening, we're doing a Valley of the Dolls cocktail party on the Raleigh studio lot. And it's a 60s theme party, and we're going to have special guests, and it's going to be really cool. So, and then we're ultimately topping it off with the memorial service for the victims on that Sunday morning at the shop. So that'll be open to the public as well. And it's going to be a well-rounded, very fascinating weekend, I think, if I do say so. I wouldn't offer it if I wouldn't do it myself.
Well, speaking of things at the shop, you had a memorial at the shop not long ago, but now I don't remember what it was. But just when you said that, it brought it back to me. But I don't. Well,
you don't mean Liberace, do you?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe that was it.
That was a treat. That was a real treat. We had a 100th birthday party for Liberace, and I tell you, Marla, I don't do costume parties normally. I'm not one to do dress-ups or anything like that, but Troy and I went for it, and it's uncomfortable to see in retrospect, but I have no regrets. I had a great time, and it's fascinating to show pictures to people, and they say, "Where are you?" Well,
I didn't see any of those pictures.
Oh, they're out there. They're out there. I posted a couple, and they're around. But I was in the Liberace's red, white, and blue sequins. You'll have to look.
It's hard for me to believe that you would do that because you are so not that way. You kind of step back to that. Oh, good. All right, I'm liking it. I'm gonna. I even
shaved my beard off for that, and I got a wig made, and I put duct tape around my head to make it look like I had plastic surgery on my eyes.
Oh my
God. I had to take it off because I got a
headache. All right, now you know what I'm going to be doing the rest of the night. I'm going to be looking for pictures. All right, why not?
Look at Brian Donnelly's Facebook page. He took the best pictures.
Oh, okay. That's always a good place to look. But there really is so much going on at the shop. You've got little Mishu, for those that don't know. Little Mishu's ashes. The actor Mishu is now.
He was the guy in the Alf costume, and we have Pugsley's ashes, and we have a bit of Shorty Shay's remains from the Manson murders, and a few other people, not just friends and family, but those are the three famous people that we have. But and we're having also in towards the end of the month, we're having there was a 1976 version of the movie Helter Skelter, And one of the actresses who was in that is doing a book signing with a couple of her other co-stars from that for that particular film. We'll be doing an event at the shop for them. So that's good. There's all kinds of weird stuff and fun stuff going on.
I know, and like I said, as soon as my new Oracle deck comes out, I will show up, and we'll play with that, because
I can't wait. I use that Oracle deck every day. I love that Oracle deck.
See, this blows my mind, too, about you. I would not think, because I remember you used to call me up and say, "Can you do a tarot reading on me?" And you were kind of half embarrassed about it, and you would come over.
Well, I don't like hitting people up for stuff like that when it's their, if it's their job. I don't like hitting people up for freebies, and but you've always been very generous to me.
Well, friends are friends. We do this. But I just, when you told me, because when you asked me one day, you sent me a text and said, "Who wrote the incantations?" And I said, "I did." And that, you were like either blown away or something, but it made me understand that you really do like that deck, and you've come a long way.
It's nice because, I can pick it up, I can pick a card, and I can read it, and I can understand it, and it's not complicated.
Yes, exactly.
And they're pretty pictures, and it's done. When I'm done with it, I have something to think about, but it doesn't go on and on and on. And to me, it's simple, and I love that, and it's pretty.
You're gonna love the new deck better. It's pretty.
I can't wait. I cannot wait to see it.
And with all the crystals and stones, you're going to have a good time. We're going to run pretty quick, but tell everybody again where they can find you. What's the hub of all things Scott Michaels, where they can go, your one-stop shop or whatever?
Well, there's always Facebook. If they go to dearlydepartedtours.com, there's links to everything, Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. But also, if you scroll down on that page, there's a mailing list you can sign up to, and the people that are on my mailing list get first crack at any tickets. They're the first ones to know of anything that's going on. Anything, and it's sent out in a weekly email. There's no junk mail in it, and it tells you everything that we're doing and the things that are coming up. So, dearlydepartedtours.com is your one-stop shop. Yeah, and I love the Thursday thing. It's all full of good stuff that I don't know because sometimes I miss things that you're up to, and it's a good place to find out stuff. And you don't just have to be in Hollywood to enjoy it or LA. There's lots of stuff going on, and especially now with the podcast. So. Go there, have a listen. Thank you for letting me twist your arm, like I said before. I really appreciate it, and I will owe you a Mexican dinner. So Yay. You and Troy and bring Patty, and we'll all go. Because it's my mother-in-law with the chocolate-covered raisins. We love her. I love her too. Now that I met her, I love her too. Every time I see her, she brings me chocolate-covered raisins. She loves you. She didn't bring me that. She brought me lettuce and cheese and all that good stuff. Oh, no, they were there. You just didn't see them. Oh, okay. We'll talk about that later. Meanwhile, thank you, and thank you all for listening in tonight, as always. And until next time, everybody, blessed be, and merry meet again. Good night.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Stirring the Cauldron with Marla Brooks. Please join us again next week at the same time for another great guest and more cauldron stirring. Any rebroadcast or other use of this program without explicit permission is strictly prohibited. Copyright 2019. The Mysterioso March by Kevin MacLeod is licensed through Incompetech.com.